The flexible schedule, I'm super excited that I get to cook for the family a lot, and it's just because I have a flexible schedule. I think that it does help a lot. It helps with the budget. It helps with all sorts of different things, but it also helps to eat healthy when you can as well. But one thing, so this recipe is the best baked chicken and rice casserole. So casseroles are always a good time. And the channel that I like to watch, or the channel that I enjoy on YouTube, is the Stay-at-Home Chef. So go take a look at the Stay-at-Home Chef. They do really good recipes. They do a great job, and they're stay-at-home chefs. So it's all really family oriented, and it's great from that sense. So while I'm cooking this, I wanted to talk about so I've noticed recently that the market has shifted. So everybody is starting to realize that the market has shifted, and we're starting to see a lot of different things inside the market, specifically inside the real estate market, as far as how selling a property is no longer at the flip of a switch. There are a lot of companies who are having a hard time, and a lot of companies have layoffs. One of those companies that are actually having a lot of layoffs and a lot of issues is the iBuyer. And the iBuyer, there's a lot of different programs around this, and they're kind of started with the idea of a cash-based buyer. So it's important, I think, to dive into iBuyer a little more as well. And if you do want to find out more information about the Stay-at-Home Chef, click on their channel below. Really, really cool recipes and great personalities as well. When we're looking into iBuyer, so the iBuyer definition is it's a new way to buy and sell homes that's catching on in the real estate world. This was back in 2020. And the definition of it is a real estate company that buys homes from sellers who sign up online. Perfect example of this is going to be Zillow and Redfin. So with Zillow and Redfin, they were two of the first to fall out. With Zillow, what Zillow was doing was they were actually purchasing homes from people, and Zillow was actually flipping the homes. And what happened with Zillow is very interesting, because what they did was they kind of got caught up in their own wave. What Zillow was doing was working off of their Zestimate. And the Zestimate, in the real estate industry for a long time, we've actually seen that the Zestimate is actually many times off one way or the other, sometimes as high as 45% off. That's a tremendous spread when you're talking about purchasing a property, putting very little work into it many times, and then putting it back on the market, or not putting any work into it at all and trying to create a margin on that. So Zillow was actually one of the first to fall out. And in fact, they don't even put the Zestimate as often as they used to. And so that's about Zillow and their iBuying. And then Redfin is also similar. Redfin also fell out of doing the iBuying pretty quick because the same scenario. Their estimate was not feet on the ground estimate. It was similar to the Zestimate. And so when you're looking at the iBuyer program, one of the biggest reasons that it had to really go away is because there was nobody on the ground doing the actual appraisal and the actual estimate of the property value. So when these iBuyer programs were going in, they were looking at their algorithms, and they were looking at, it's a 4-bedroom and it goes for X amount. Now, they are not interested many times in taking that property, actually putting work into the property, and then reselling it. What they're actually doing is they're taking the property and they're doing almost no work to the property, and they're actually purchasing the property in order to resell it to an already pegged client, so to speak. And so when you look at it from this perspective, they are making money. They're trying to make money. The whole idea is still for them to make money, but they weren't making as much money as they thought they could. And so that became the rub for them. It's also important to know that iBuyers have been around forever. And two of the leaders right now are going to be Open Door and OfferPad. And when they're looking at their model, it is a little bit different. You can also say that when you see a commercial like I buy homes for cash and scenarios like that, they're also a sort of iBuyer. When they're coming in and they're purchasing, that goes back to the investor that I had mentioned before. And when you're looking at how an investor purchases a property, an investor purchases a property again for the bottom line. They don't look at, there's no emotions involved. There's no way of them to look at anything else other than the bottom line. How much can they make on selling this home after they do anything to it, and many times don't do anything to it at all? What they'll do is there's different types of investors and different types of iBuyers. And the term iBuyer can also be become very loose, because once a term is out there, you'll have people try to climb onto it just because it is more of an advertised term. It's more of an understanding of how people can then use this and leverage it to their benefit. So many investors might use the term iBuyer program, things of that nature, or we purchase for cash. Cut the agents out of it. And that's totally fine. Everybody purchases things in different ways. What's important to know, though, is that the investors who are successful will actually work with agents. I've got a line of investors, and so does every other agent. All of us have lines of investors that reach out to us on a daily basis in order to try and find out properties that we have coming soon. And that's really where things get interesting for a seller, because not every property should be an iBuyer property, or not every property should be going to an investor. An investor, again, is always going to look for the bottom line. An iBuyer, very similar. They're going to be looking for that bottom line as well, and they'll be trying to get the best deal they can on that property. Again, because they're purchasing for what is cash or what appears to be cash. And all the details are going to be inside of the purchase agreement. Now, that purchase agreement is always important because you want to make sure that all of the details are in there. If you're working with a buyer who's purchasing for cash and they're an investor, if you're working with an iBuyer, those details can get very fuzzy very quickly. And so it's important that you understand those details as well. The actual iBuyer programs will always work with a cooperating agent, or an agent who somehow is involved. Every once in a while, there's going to be an exception. However, most of the time, there is going to be an agent involved, because the iBuyer programs do realize how important it is to have an agent involved, because it helps to protect them as well. And so that is an important piece and an important thing to point out. Not always does it happen, but many times they actually will have an agent that's involved with it. The iBuyer programs, like I mentioned before, the offer pad and open door, those programs themselves, they're actually not interested in the ugly houses. Those are the programs that we currently have that are out there, and they're still moving forward. Now, things always change, of course, and tomorrow that could change, but currently those are kind of the two programs that are in the forefront. And they're not looking for ugly houses. Where you're going to find somebody who's looking for the ugly houses, that's going to be an investor or a flipper, somebody who's looking to flip the contract. So that's actually an interesting piece and a totally separate subject. We can dive into it at a later time. And many times, like I mentioned, the iBuyer programs are based on the algorithms, and they're actually not based on the feet on the street, so to speak. When you have the appraiser coming out to the property, or an inspector, if you're working with an investor and they're a big investor or a small investor is going to do the property investigation themselves. And a bigger investor is going to do the property investigation typically with an inspector that they actually bring in. Now, the inspection is loose because you're not talking about they're coming in to make sure that the wires are grounded and that the plumbing is properly done. They're coming in 99% of the time to make sure that they can take pictures of a structure that's standing. So there is a big difference there, and they might call it an appraisal, they might call it an inspection, but when you're working with investors and when you're working with a hard money lender or a cash buyer who's an investor, and even as the iBuyers, you're working with a different type of program, and you have to make sure that you do watch everything that's going on with it. So that's about the iBuyer in a nutshell. I'm always happy to talk about it and to let you know the chicken casserole did turn out well, and it turned out, it worked out. I probably left it in there for a little longer than I should have, but it worked out. Kids were happy, wife is happy, everybody's happy with it. And also, don't forget the stay-at-home chef. Check out their program and let me know. Like, subscribe to this channel. Let me know if you have any questions about real estate at all. I'm always here and happy to help. Take care.